Hey, buddy, eyes up here.
All right, folks, I just got out of James Gunn's Superman. It's getting dark on me, so quick thoughts. I wanted to walk out feeling hopeful, optimistic. I had some things, hesitations with the trailer, hopefully clips taken out of context. Thankfully, they kind of were. I do believe Corenswet gives you exactly what you need, man. I truly believed that this man could fly, but I also believed in what others see in him, and I think this movie beautifully portrays that and conveys that. I really enjoyed Lex Luthor here, Nicholas Hoult. I do believe there is some untapped potential there. Maybe I wanted to feel more scared of him, but I definitely like that dynamic when we do get to see them on screen. And then, you know, Superman, Rachel Brosnahan, that dynamic, Lois Lane, she is so perfect as that character, and I love them together. And so it's hitting all of the points that I needed it to hit to be a really fun, entertaining Superman movie. When it comes to the plot, there is a lot going on, and I was really nervous about the visuals. Thankfully, most of them are great. There are a few times where I had some nitpicks, and we'll get into some things that don't work about this film as a whole, but all in all, it did evoke the exact feelings that I needed it to evoke, and in kind of like a Sam Raimi Spider-Man type of way, taking the comic bookiness of that franchise and just injecting the exact same feeling walking out of this. Two very different movies, by the way, but it's very comic booky, somewhat cartoonish in a good way. I'm a big Justice League Unlimited fan. I've actually been going back and watching episodes. I felt a little bit of that here, which is awesome. And also, I enjoyed the supporting cast and the surrounding characters. Gets a little ridiculous. I didn't love all of the humor in there. I do wish they would have let the emotions fly a bit more, if you will, but we'll talk about all of that in the full review. I'll get into my issues. All in all, I feel good walking out of this theater, and I believe I can fly. I can.
Are you being serious right now?
Yeah.
You'd let me interview you as Superman.
Sure.
All right, folks, we're back in studio. I've taken a couple of hours to let it sink in. Superman 2025, James Gunn, Rachel Brosnahan, David Corenswet, Nicholas Hoult. It is a good cast all the way around. I'm talking supporting pieces and the little CGI dog, who admittedly I was worried about, but as this movie progressed, I'm like, no, that's how a dog would act. Not my mini girl, though. She's perfection. Everything she does is perfect, and I love her. But that kind of leads me into my first praise for this film, and it's something I said about Man of Steel. I want to make it very clear. I am a fan of Man of Steel. I know a lot of people didn't like the direction they took the character, and some people have issues with Snyder. I understand that, but I'm a big fan of that movie. I am also a fan of the one that started it all, Christopher Reeve. And so, as someone who is a fan of both sides of the spectrum, I was excited to see where this would ultimately fall. We knew he was bringing back the idea of hope, optimism, justice, what else? Red underwear. And when I watched the interview on why Corenswet decided to go with the underwear, saying, I wanted this Superman to feel approachable. Even though he's this big, powerful, god-like alien, you want to be someone that someone can come up to and ask directions to, or a question, right? I need that silliness to come through in this character, even though he is this all-powerful being. And that's when kind of the vibe and the tone of the movie kind of stuck and clicked with me. And I'm feeling that throughout the first 25 minutes of this film, thinking this is a guy who's ultimately maybe a sillier, lighter version of the character compared to Cavill's Superman, but I don't mind that because it immediately puts you into this world knowing what to expect. And sometimes that's a bad thing. Big, giant kaiju creatures attack Metropolis, and it kind of feels like a daily event. I mean, this happens a couple of times. People on the ground taking videos and pictures. And don't tell me that's not realistic, because I've seen people do really dumb things in real life during major world events. And I'm like, yeah, that's as dumb as it is in 2025. That's believable, but it feels like an everyday occurrence. And that's going to obviously take away from some of those elevated stakes that you want to feel rooting for these characters. But at the same time, it's this episodic structure that Gunn is injecting into this movie. And as I continue to think more and more about Justice League Unlimited. I'm talking the early 2000s animated series, folks. Those are some of my all-time favorite shows. I've seen every episode multiple times, but that's how this movie is laid out in a way. Lex's plan and numerous events going on in this film, it feels like episode, 23 of season 1 as opposed to season 1, episode 1, which is kind of what some people will be expecting with the Superman. But at the same time, man, we know the story. We understand why Superman is here, how he got here. Now, there is a little twist to this narrative that this movie provides, and we'll talk about that in a spoiler video. Don't need to talk about it here. Some people are going to be really frustrated by that decision. I, for one, didn't mind it. I'm okay with doing some different things here, experimenting with a character that ultimately we've seen 1,000 times before. And we're seeing a similar version of that again compared to Christopher Reeve's character, but we are trying to do some different things to it. And that's okay, right? Even though that is one of the core pieces we know regarding Superman, it's one of those modulations that I don't mind seeing because it allows us to feel something different. Now, one of those negatives for me is how exposition heavy, specifically those control room sequences are with Lex, because it felt like Lex was giving us a little bit more exposition than we needed. We could have figured that out, right? Yeah, there are going to be kids watching this or young adults, but we don't need everything to be spilled out to us. But it is kind of cool how Lex decides to fight Superman in this film. Fighting him up here, obviously, but there's a physicality, a physical element to that as well. Now, there is a predictable element here to Lex's plan that I saw coming from a mile away. I won't dive any deeper in this video, but all in all, I am thinking, this is kind of cool the way this movie is laid out, because Lex has clearly been trying to take down Superman for a long time, and we're just watching this specific scheme play out, and whether it succeeds or fails, it was really cool to see how Superman has grown and will decide to combat this. But Superman is dealing with a lot in this film, and this is where I want to talk about David Corenswet, a guy or an alien that just wants to approach life in an optimistic and ultimately hopeful way. He and Lois talk about it in the film, saying, yeah, we are kind of opposites in the way that we perceive the world, which is going to be good for both sides of the audience there. But you see it in this movie, man, and that's what we've been wanting to see from Superman for quite some time. Not only humans, but down to the smallest creatures. We see him save a dog and a squirrel. Like, there are numerous scenes and sequences that show who Superman is, and it has been instilled in him since birth how to approach things. And that side of Superman is great. Now, I'm someone who loved Man of Steel and didn't mind seeing kind of the other approach, which is okay because the world can be, well, grating. But I love seeing how he and Lois are kind of opposites from that standpoint. Both good people, it's just their approach to the world is drastically different, but I love their chemistry in this movie, man. Rachel Brosnahan, my God, she's so good as Lois Lane. I expected her to be. If you've ever seen Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, you're thinking, oh yeah, she could crush Lois Lane. And she did, ultimately. She may be the best performance in this film, even though Corenswet did kind of embody what I wanted Superman to be. And there were some clips that came out online, and honestly, guys, like I said in the reaction, I didn't like those clips. I'm thinking, ooh, I don't want a moody and emotional Superman. But when you see them in context of this movie, you're like, oh no, I understand that, because all of the other moments with Superman, he is of that stature and attitude that we want to see. And even though the human inside of him wants to react that way, I mean, look, I do it. I've seen some stupid comments and things that I've been... But hey, if you're a normal person who goes into a movie not wanting to love it or hate it, that's the thing about this film. People have already made up their minds, which is fine. I mean, it's not a... I understand that. Movies are a hard thing to be completely unbiased about, but you kind of see that humanity in Superman of like, I am getting frustrated and flustered because the thing going on the other side of the world that I feel very passionate about is impacting me and affecting me because of how our government is reacting. And that leads me into kind of a negative for this film, is there is a lot going on in this movie. Like an episode of Justice League, when sometimes you have 2 to 3 missions happening, they are throwing a ton at you, and it did start to get a little, grating by the end. I'm thinking, oh man, do we have to keep cutting back between this, and this? Ultimately, it does all come together, not seamlessly, but kind of beautifully and emotionally. But I was thinking, Gunn is throwing a lot at us. Maybe he didn't need one of these 3 to 4 plot points that are all happening at the same time by the end, but they do kind of come together. I just like that side mission aspect to this film that ultimately makes it feel like how this world works, what the stakes are, how nothing is going to surprise you, and even a little dog flying around, Crypto. It does kind of surprise some people in the movie, but you're thinking, no, that makes sense, because it works. How about the Justice Gang? I was so nervous for this. Like, is it going to impede on Superman's story? I don't think it does. Again, this is a world already populated with superheroes, so it makes sense that they show up. I was afraid Green Lantern was going to be annoying. He wasn't. I actually really enjoyed that humor. There's one joke that kind of drags on for a bit with the Justice Gang, but all in all, I liked his presence. Mr. Terrific is, well, it's in the name, terrific. The action with the T-spheres, there's a scene, James Gunn likes to do one of these per movie, and there's a lot of action in this film, but one in particular involving Terrific that was genuinely as good as it gets. I loved it. Hawk Girl is there. A little disappointed in her, honestly, because I love her so much in the animated series, but she was there. Hopefully she'll have more to do at some point. But they never took away, implemented well. There's even another character in there that I thoroughly enjoyed. It is really all about Lois and Clark, though, at the end of the day. And I say Clark loosely because even when we see Clark Kent here, most of the time, we're just seeing Superman. And so if I had one complaint about a lack of screen time for someone, it would have been more of that version of Clark Kent. But who's going to complain that we get a ton of time with Superman? I certainly am not. And it's Superman trying to navigate the world while trying to save the world, while trying to be a good dog owner and have a relationship. So lots going on in this man's life, or this alien's life. And how about Lex, by the way? Even when he seems like a whiny guy who doesn't get his way, I think that embodies who Lex Luthor truly is. But there are times where he is truly a threat to Superman in this film, a guy who wants his way no matter what, and no matter what else is going to happen to the people around him. And I really liked that embodiment. I think, in a way, his character falls short of his potential in this film. I could have been a little more scared by him, but the performance by Nicholas Hoult is up there with one of the better villainous performances we have seen. And it shows him more as a guy who isn't just this big crime boss, more so someone who just wants his way and hates everything about Superman. And going all the way back to fans of the comics, even if you didn't love the animated series and you've hated everything since, there's a lot in here that makes this feel like the most comic booky superhero movie I've seen in a while. I likened it to Sam Raimi's take on Spider-Man. Very different film, very different approaches, but just how that brought a comic book to life so well in the early 2000s with some silliness. Everyone remembers this scene. Or anything from Spider-Man 3. And you've got similar elements in this film where it gets a little silly at times, but that's okay because that's the world that we've established. There is not a lot of suspension of disbelief at play here because they established it. From the opening text, they tell you the type of world that you're in. So if you're sitting back going, oh, that's not very believable, it's like, yeah, they established that in the beginning. You may not like the approach, and that's fine, but it works tonally with what they were going for. My only issue tonally was the humor on occasion that does compromise the emotions. It's not that the humor was bad. It is that James Gunn humor that we know and sometimes love. But just like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, it does occasionally get in the way of the big grand emotion that we are trying to feel. That being said, it doesn't always do that. There is an emotional swing and home run at the end of this film that I thoroughly loved, and I'm not somebody who walks out going, oh my God, it made me cry. I was bawling my eyes out because I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit too stoic for my own good. Or maybe it's the Batman shirt. It makes me feel nothing except for what happened to my parents. Admittedly, though, it made me smile. And as much that is going on in this film, lots of swings, most of it hits, but there are a few misses. I was okay with a lot of it because I was just super entertained. Super!
This guy stinks!
And I'd love to know what you all think. Should I rank the Superman movies, the James Gunn movies, Superman villain tier list? What would you like to see from me? And should I do do a spoiler review. I'm thinking of asking another YouTuber to do that with me. Guess who it is? You guys know who it is. But I genuinely, I want to know where you all fall, because that's extremely important with a film like this. And if you do have major issues, what are they? Why are they? And where are they? Superman evokes a few distinct feelings that few comic book movies have been able to capture as of late. An unmistakable sincerity shines through, with Corenswet radiating hope and buoyancy. The film feels like a vibrant throwback tonally, which doesn't always work in its favor, yet its knack for striking emotional chords at the right moment is impressive. It eventually becomes overcrowded with ideas, but the episodic nature of Lex's plan gave me Justice League Unlimited vibes, and that exact comparison instantly elevated this experience. It won't hit high notes for every fan, but it hopes to sing a different song that may potentially lay a spirited foundation for an exciting universe. And I am excited for this universe, where they go with characters that already exist, and where they go with a couple of characters that I'm excited to see in the future, and I will leave it at that. By the way, 2 post-credit scenes, they're not really all that important. If you want to smile, sure, but if you've got to pee, go pee. That's the worst feeling, when you hold and pee for as long as sometimes I do, and then you go just because you forget, or you have ADD, which inevitably frustrates my wife, and I get nothing done because of it. All right, thanks for watching.